It's a hymn to Aphrodite, and it's basically a poem where Sappho appeals to Aphrodite. She imagines Aphrodite coming to help her, and Aphrodite actually says, "What's wrong, Sappho? How can I?
What do you want this time?
Yes.
Well, not you again."
How can I fix your love life this time? It's always the same." And Aphrodite promises that she will, the girl in question, if she's running away from her now, will on a future occasion be in the opposite position, whatever that means. She will be the one demanding favors from Sappho.
Hello and welcome to the Imaginary Song Hunt, a monthly meeting of modern minds to reanimate lost songs of the deep past. I'm Steph Connor, and here I am in Lotos Lab HQ with Jonathan Bingham and Barnaby Brown.
Hello. Hello.
So this month, June, is Sappho month. Yes, where we're obsessing about Sappho and how to sing Sappho, obviously, who wouldn't want to do that? Yes, we got very excited about the possibilities of taking inspiration from this icon, a great composer, one of the first women composers for whom no music has survived, sadly. So obviously it has to be reimagined. And
a lot of fun doing that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So perfect imaginary song hunt. Collaborator, Sappho, as well as being obviously a gay icon. And so where to start our journey? Well, we thought we'd better take our first tentative steps with a consultation with someone who knew a lot more about it than we did.
So who was that then?
Ian Rutherford. We went to Ian Rutherford to pick his brain for starters. Ian is a professor of Greek in the Classics Department at the University of Reading, and he trained at Oxford and held positions in the States, so at the Centre for Hellenic Studies in Washington, D.C., and the University of Cincinnati, the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World in New York. And he has published on Greek lyric poetry. He is particularly an expert on Pindar, and also a specialist in ancient religions and kind of intercultural exchanges between ancient Greece and the rest of the world, well, ancient Egypt and Anatolia, to be precise.
Which, like the island of Lesbos, geographically is appropriate for Sappho.
Oh.
So apart from sounding like about as Lotos Lab a person as you could possibly find in the entire world, how did you come to meet Ian and get involved with Ian?
Well, I was in Würzburg chatting with Stefan Hagel over breakfast, and we were thinking, who do we want to invite to Matera for our courses where sacred ritual is important? And Ian's name was about the first to come up. He's a magisterial scholar and a wonderful, vibrant spirit. It's been a joy collaborating with him, and his knowledge is just immense. I mean, it's fantastic. You can't stop him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a great time with Ian delving into the cultural context of Sappho's poetry, the everyday life of young women on Lesbos who would have been singing and dancing the music of this world, and then a huge deep dive into the nitty-gritty of Sapphic rhythm.
The grittiest nitty I think you can imagine, honestly. But it's fascinating.
And who better to take us into that world, because he does so with such a soft touch and light-heartedness and enthusiasm, an infectious love of the topic.
Well, Ian Rutherford, thank you so much for coming imaginary song hunting.
It's a pleasure. I can't think of any better way of spending an hour in the afternoon.
Oh, hooray. Let's see if you still think that by the time we get to the end of this.
The nitty-gritty.
We've asked you to chat to us today about Sappho, and it's an exciting opportunity for us to be able to kind of pick your brain as we try to find ways to sing Sappho's words. So we're going to get into some nitty gritty, but I want to start with the bigger picture, really. So Sappho is a huge figure, and a lot of what we think about Sappho is mythologized and is not necessarily exactly what's transmitted in, ancient writings. A lot of it is kind of invented. A lot of it comes from popular culture. To us, Sappho is important because she's supposedly one of the greatest musicians of all time, you know, the 10th muse, one of the greatest poets of all time, but for whom only one poem survives complete and no music survives. So much about Sappho is imaginary, perfect for the imaginary song hunt. But I want to start by asking you about the evidence. So what do we know about who Sappho was and who do we know it from?
That's a very good question, and the answer is both. It's both an exciting thing, but it's also a bit disappointing if you end up knowing how little we know. We think that Sappho lived on a Greek island, wonderful Greek island, Lesbos, in about 600 BC. And everything we know about her really comes from the poems. There are also stories told about her, which circulated later. But like stories told about writers today, you really can't know whether they're true or not. And they probably weren't based on very much because there were so few things written down at that time. We know that a few hundred years later, Sappho had become like a major poet. She was someone who people learnt about at school. They probably learnt to play her works too. There were lots of poems by Sappho that were known. Whole manuscripts, like papyrus rolls, full of them. We have a few. We have one complete poem, and we have fragments of a few others transmitted mostly on papyrus scrolls, which were found in Egypt, usually dating to the Roman period. That's the earliest we can. Mostly, that's the earliest we can push it.
You find bits of her poems quoted in other writers. Is there much that's transmitted that way, or is it just kind of little fragments here and there?
No, an awful lot actually. It's testimonial fragments are transmitted that way, as they're called. Because it was part of. By the Roman period and even the Hellenistic period, it was part of being an educated person that you knew the classics, just like it is too. So you would kind of put in a little excerpt, a little snippet of Sappho and various other lyric poets too. And actually, the text there is, one problem is the text isn't always reliable. They sometimes change it a bit, but yeah, that's right. Yes.
Perennial problem with ancient texts and ancient writers.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of course, today we have this idea of, rigorous scholarship and making sure that we're showing clearly what our emendations are and what this editor's opinions are, and it's a very, very modern thing, isn't it? In historical scholarship, it was just the done thing to change everything to make it fit your ideology or your worldview.
Yeah. One could take different views of the poems. I mean, one could be optimistic and say that what survives is pretty close to what she wrote.
If she wrote it at all.
If she wrote it at all, exactly, yes. And she may not have done, but there may have been people could write around about that time. So maybe she did. Maybe she even put them in order in little books, little book of poetry. That's been argued. But the other side, the other argument is that that's actually very little goes back to her. And once she became famous, people were kind of attributing poems to her, even though they were by other people. Maybe they were traditional. This even happens with Shakespeare. We don't know that all of the plays are by Shakespeare, and people may have attributed other things to him. And in Elizabethan England, we have far more data. We have loads and loads of documents, whereas we have virtually nothing for Lesbos at all. So we don't know that much, but we can kind of figure out that the chances are that she was a real poetess, a real woman, and she lived on Lesbos. And with her family, she was from a fairly aristocratic background, so they were well off. And she was married, and she had children. She mentions a daughter called Clais in one of her poems. And famously, she also had brothers. And we know that one of the brothers was a trader, Caraxus, and we know that the earliest reference to Sappho anywhere comes from an historian, the father of history, Herodotus, who was writing in the late 5th century BC, and he has a little story about how Sappho's brother Caraxus ended up in Egypt. He was trading, as people did that a lot around about that time. So it was like a big opportunity to make money in the Mediterranean around about that time, because Egypt had opened up and people were going down there to trade to Naucratis.
So, yeah, she was married, she had kids. let's tackle the big question, the thing that kind of comes up whenever Sappho's name is mentioned, which is sexuality. We want to talk about her as a musician, but this is the juicy thing that everyone cares about. So let's just quickly address it. Most famous lesbian of all time.
Yes, I mean, she's the reason that lesbians are called lesbians. It's quite a claim to fame.
Yeah.
Some of her poems do express feelings, romantic feelings, strong feelings toward women. And probably mostly young women, though we're not really certain. And that's possibly as far as it goes. I mean, some of them, one of them mentions a bed and flowers and that sort of thing, but it's a bit ambiguous. None of them, as far as we know, actually talk about sex, physical sex, but perhaps that would have been a bit indecorous in an ancient poem, so perhaps they just wouldn't have done. But exactly, I mean, so she did have relationships with women. The question is how to interpret that, and it's difficult. One thing is that one of the reasons I think this may have, if they were real relationships, one of the reasons it could have happened is because she wasn't a lesbian in the modern sense. She was married. She had at least one child. That was like her day job. And the funny thing is, for romantic release, if you wanted something, aside from your husband, the only thing you could really do was to pursue women, because anything else would have been regarded as infinitely worse.
The one penis policy.
This would account for what is actually rather a remarkable thing, which is the first romantic poetry that survives anywhere is homosexual.
And so is that Sappho's poetry?
Yeah. Homosexual in a limited sense, that she was also married and had a child, but this was where she could get romantic, where her romantic imagination could flourish,
and where it could be expressed in, I suppose, the public sphere of a poem that was performed.
That's, I think, how this must have been, actually. Yes, it's a remarkable thing, actually. I mean, one might have expected also poems where young, teenagers express their feelings for each other, but those don't survive really from early Greece in the same way. So I think that Sappho's poetry fills a gap. Having said that, there's much more to be said on that, because not everyone accepts that these were even relationships, in the romantic relationships, in the way that they would be, that term would be used today. But some people, for example, think that this sounds even more outrageous, but that one view which has been widely entertained since I think since the ancient world, is that Sappho was she kind of had an educational role. And she was, when girls were growing up, they had to, you couldn't just throw a girl into marriage. It was a nightmare, and people had to be kind of trained, told what to do, taken away from their families, educated, perhaps taught how to be, attractive young prospects for suitors. So you'd learn to play music, you'd learn to dance. This is where the dancing would come in. You would go to major sort of religious centers on Lesbos and dance in a group, and everyone would come and watch and admire how well you danced, and other things too. And in that, eventually the girls would, if they were successful, go and get married, and they might actually go, such is the way of, arranged marriages, that the girl would leave town. She might even go to a foreign country.
Well, in fact, that sort of brings us on to the next thing we'd love to learn from you about, and that is this whole wider culture of women, particularly unmarried girls, dancing and singing simultaneously. I mean, we're used to the idea of people dancing, and we're used to the idea of, in the modern world, of people singing. But what is this about singing at the same time as dancing that seems, if I understand rightly, to be so fundamental to the ancient Greek world?
It clearly was a very important thing, but I have to disagree with you on one respect, because it's actually quite important in the modern world as well. I mean, you just have to think of a girl band. There are pop groups, so this happens all the time. It's actually a very
Fair point, Barnaby. You're forgetting about the Pussycat Dolls and the Spice Girls.
It's so pervasive that it's almost like it's cognitive. It's something which young people like doing. It gives them a certain.
Oh, young people like it, don't they?
Yeah. But it's like simultaneous. It's like simultaneous action and seeing at the same time. It seems to be a very common thing. But in ancient Greece, we do have a lot of evidence for this, more so than from other cultures. And the place we have most evidence for, famously, is Sparta, which is some distance from Lesbos in mainland Greece. And Sparta has a reputation of being a very sort of masculine place where the only game in town was warfare. And, they were very good fighters.
Led by the Aulos, of course. Training the dancers with the aulos.
Music comes into the military in ancient Greece. That's right. You have to it's almost like a form of dance itself, being in a phalanx, as they call it, a military formation. But from before Sappho, even from the 7th century BC, we have a famous poem supposed to have been composed by a poet called Alcman, and it's called the Maiden Song. The Partheneon, they call it, from the word Parthenos, which is the Greek for usually would be translated maiden or virgin, but really it means, it's a bit kind of Protestant. It really means a young girl who hasn't been married. That's the only, and hasn't given birth to children, which would be the same. But the poem by Alcman, so-called, which is about, would have been originally about 100 lines long, and we have about 50 lines of it in strophes. The music must have been wonderful, but the surviving part of it describes these various girls in Sparta at this time. They would probably have been from aristocratic families. And they're sort of talking to each other, and they're in the chorus, but sort of just discussing each other's appearance and talking about the song contest they're in and the rival chorus and how they're gonna. And we can't really understand all the details. Some of the characters may actually be goddesses, but whatever you think of it, it's an amazing composition. But this must have happened everywhere, and it's only by chance that it survives. I imagine most places, most cultures of the ancient world, if you have if you have young people dancing together, that would just be regarded as normal, and no one would have bothered recording it really. So the differences in Sparta they did, but I think one can assume that these sort of performances by young people would have been common everywhere, and they've got to do with. A lot. They often have to do with kind of becoming a citizen, learning how to socialize, learning how to behave in culture. So you have to get on with other people. Dancing in a group at a certain age is a very good way of doing that. At least that's the theory.
Should we move on? Should we move on to chatting about the prayer to Aphrodite?
Definitely.
Is it time?
We have a few dozen fragments of Sappho, but one of the saddest things is that almost nothing survives entire. We sometimes have to supply a few bits, but we do have this one poem which is preserved 100%, or at least 99.8%, I would say, which is the so-called.
We'll have to quiz you on the 0.2% later.
It's a single syllable which is missing. And no one's really successfully figured out what's in there. But you can come back to that. But it's a hymn to Aphrodite, and it's basically a poem where Sappho appeals to Aphrodite. She imagines Aphrodite coming to help her, and Aphrodite actually says, "What's wrong, Sappho? How can I?
What do you want this time?
Yes.
Well, not you again.
How can I fix your love life this time? It's always the same." And Aphrodite promises that she will, the girl in question, if she's running away from her now, will on a future occasion be in the opposite position, whatever that means. She will be the one demanding favors from Sappho. And Aphrodite is depicted in a very nice way. Greek gods always have they often move around in great chariots with horses like the sun, but Aphrodite's chariot is driven by birds, so it's very sweet. Doves, which one would expect from Aphrodite. It's a very nice Aphrodite. Aphrodite can be a terrible goddess too. She can move the universe, but this is definitely the kind of sweeter side of Aphrodite. And and we have that this poem survives entirely, and it's partly because it's cited. We were talking about the citations by ancient authors before, and there's a Greek author living in Rome under Augustus called Dionysius from Halicarnassus in Turkey, and he was a great historian, but he also wrote a book on how to write nicely called the Composition of Words. It's basically how to make sure that when you compose prose, you put the words together in a nice way, so it's kind of nice rather than awkward.
That's why he cites Sappho, because he thinks she's good.
Sappho for one particular type of style. And he cites the whole poem, and that's why we have it. And because of that, we have the poem. And it also was transmitted on papyri. And we did from Egypt. We have a papyrus actually, which is kind of a strip. It's like a vertical strip down the middle of the lines, which shows that it was around. That poem was also cited by ancient people interested in meter, ancient writers interested in meter, and they say it was the beginning of Book 1.
Sappho 1.
Yes.
Opus 1,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
We want to ask you about the other strand in the sonic tapestry, the accompanying instrument. Lyre, aulos, or was it sung unaccompanied? Do we know anything about the instrument that Sappho would have accompanied this prayer?
The sad answer is we know so little. I mean, the people who invented, who first started writing, putting these poems into collections, for some reason didn't bother to write anything down about the music, and this didn't change until the Hellenistic period, as far as we know. So we don't know the music about the instrument. We do know that Sappho mentions various forms of lyre. She's depicted with a lyre called a barbitos on some vases, big lyre. There's a lyre called a pectis or a parctis. Yes, very good. Which is talking to the right people. Which is mentioned, and one called a tortoise as well, like Heluna, in one of her fragments. She never mentions wind instruments. Ah, very good.
We've got two tortoises here, big tortoise and a little tortoise.
She never mentions wind instruments, as far as I know. So one perhaps would have, one expects those instruments. And the other question is, was it solo or choral performance? That's also very difficult to answer. I think most people think that Sappho was a lot of the time Sappho was performed by choruses of young girls and by other people probably, and the some of the poems seem to refer to performers. Some people have argued that they weren't all performed by choruses. So when she's very, very personal, talking about heartbreak and so on, maybe that's harder, but perhaps that's not impossible either. And then if we go right down to the Roman period, I think I mentioned this earlier, the Roman poet Horace does a sort of imitation of Sappho, where he has a lot of girls and boys performing in Sapphic stanzas, in Sapphic rhythm, and presumably music at a great festival. So choral performance, probably part of the way this was perceived, but maybe you could do it a solo by solo performance as well.
And so, dare I move into another question where we may not have very much evidence: how to pronounce it? You know, she's there on the island of Lesbos, 600 BC. How do we know the sounds of her language?
Well, but I'm just going to add a supplementary question before you answer, Ian, which is to say, also, which period do you choose to kind of, if you want to reconstruct a period pronunciation when you've got something for which evidence survives over a span of, hundreds, sometimes even thousands of years. Are you trying to reconstruct Sappho and a group of girls, on Lesbos with Sappho, or are you trying to reconstruct a pronunciation from a period in which it's transmitted in, a later manuscript or on a later papyrus? So yeah, just adding a bit more supplementary information to the same question. How the hell do you decide how to pronounce the text?
The second point is very good. I mean, one would in a way settle for pronouncing it the way people performing it in Athens in 500, 400 BC would have performed it, or in the Hellenistic period, or even in the Roman period. The ancient Greek language, of course, changes. The pronunciation changes a good deal in that period. They start pronouncing every vowel almost every vowel like an E, called eticism. So it did begin, and some of the consonants get changed as well. They get changed into fricatives like F and that sort of thing, and V. We have people who work on ancient Greek linguistics have a rough idea, reasonably good idea of how ancient Greek must have been pronounced in those periods. I think it's not perfect. Probably if an ancient Greek could be revived and listened to modern people actually trying to pronounce it, they would do a double take. It would sound terrible. But we know, linguistically, we know something about it. We're not entirely sure about things like the things that are relevant to music, actually, like voice accents, at least, intonation, that sort of thing, are a bit of a mystery, I think. The question with Sappho, the particular issue is the dialect of Lesbos, because it was a bit, as you know, it was a bit different from the language spoken elsewhere. Sappho's poems are actually written in this dialect, which makes it easier for people to read it the right way. And it doesn't make a huge difference, but there are some differences in vowels and occasionally consonants. So, for example, the letter W had mostly fallen out of usage in Greek. They once had a W called a digamma, but around about 1000 BC they stopped saying it in most places. But Lesbos still had a digamma. So the word for rose in most parts of Greek is rhodos, but on Lesbos they said Worodos with a W, Worodos, but they wrote it Borodos. So if you actually read the Greek, you'll see it says Brodos, but that's Worodos. So we know things like that. That's made a bit more complicated by the fact that spelling probably isn't original, and it was probably introduced into the transmission by people who weren't from Lesbos, who wanted to create an impression of how people on Lesbos spoke.
Wanting to be more lesbian than lesbians.
It's all a bit complicated, but we we have some ideas. So I think that's all you can say, really. You're never going to get that perfect. Another cool thing about the dialect of Lesbos compared with the rest of Greece was that they did something with the pitch accent. Now, in ancient Greece, words have what's called a pitch accent. So they have one syllable which is higher, tonally higher than the others. So, for example, the name of the goddess Aphrodite elsewhere in Greece, it would be Aphrodita. Aphroditer, actually, usually, but Aphrodita. And on the island of Lesbos, they actually shifted the accent back nearer the front of the word. So in that case, you would have Aphrodita as opposed to Aphrodita elsewhere. And this is quite standard.
But how do we know? Well, we don't have an audio recording from 600 BC.
That's a brilliant question. The answer to that is because ancient grammarians tell us. And so the accents are actually written on the manuscripts. As you know, a high accent and what they call an acute accent in ancient Greece is written with a diagonal line, like an acute accent in French.
That's so helpful. They were thinking about the imaginary song hunt 2,000 years ago, and they were actually telling us. They actually
did it for us.
There's some truth in that, actually, yes. And people have speculated about whether pitch accents are connected to the melody in some way. I mean, it's a very, very complicated issue, and I think no certain conclusions have been drawn on this, but it's possible. It's not any different from prose, actually. They wrote accents in prose, and it was Originally, I would imagine to distinguish different words, because sometimes you have a word which is spelt, two words that are spelt the same way and distinguished only by the accent. A very good example of that, this is becoming a grammar lesson. A very good example of that, for example, is the word for who in Greek, which is tis. And the only way to distinguish that from the word for someone, which is tis, is the accent. Who is high and someone is low. So that's the sort of thing. So you need accents, and then they're used in poetry too. But
sorry to do this, but I'm just going to throw in here an example from Chinese, which is that the word for poem and the word for shit are only distinguished by the tonal difference.
Yes, that's exactly the same sort of
perfect double entendre.
Yeah,
that's right. And this is going to happen in many languages. So that's a very difficult issue, though. This is the sort of thing where someone will discover a hidden connection between, say, accents in Pindar or Bacchylides and melody, and write a whole article about it or something.
Oh, come on, we want it. But I think we're going to dive now into what, for us as performers, wanting to sing Sappho, which is maybe the biggest question of all, or certainly the most contentious question, and that surrounds the rhythm. Because Greek, if my understanding is correct, it doesn't only have these pitch accents where some syllables are high and most of them are low, and occasionally you get a squiggle and it goes up and down. But you've also got long syllables and short syllables.
Yeah.
And this means that you've got rhythm embedded in the verse. And of course, this is a wonderful thing, because it means that as musicians, we can approach this very ancient verse, and we've got not the whole of the music, but an element of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So we don't have any surviving melody, but as Barnaby has pointed out, we do know a lot about the rhythm, because we can work that out from the patterns of long and short syllables. And Sappho's poetry is written in a particular rhythm. Can you explain to us what that is?
Well, it's a typical type of meter. We call these lyric meters to distinguish them from meters associated with epic poetry and so on. And one of the characteristics of this type of meter is that a line will have a particular configuration in the middle. They always have a choriamb somewhere in the middle of the line, which is in metrical terms long, short, long, basically. So that's a clear sign of it. And a Sapphic stanza, as it's called, because Sappho uses them a lot, though she that's not the only meter she uses, and other poets use it too. But a Sapphic stanza basically consists of, as we now know, we now say 3 lines. And the first 2 lines have 11 syllables, and I mean, the pattern is basically, to put it in terms of D-dum, it goes dum da dum 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 da da dum da dum dum. So that's 11 syllables, and there are 2 of those. And then the third line is actually something very similar. The first part of the third line is almost indistinguishable from those first 2 lines, but it continues, it's sort of extended, and it's got a section at the end which is long, short, long, dum, da, da, dum, dum. So that's the basic pattern. It's 3 lines, often written out as 4 lines in collections of meter.
Now, with Sappho, we've got these long and short syllables, and we've got some patterns. But there are some big questions. And I suppose the very first question I want to put to you, Ian, as someone who's looked at this for many decades, we're complete beginners, okay? We're musicians. We are not scholars of ancient Greek. We're coming to you on our knees to say, please help. What do we do? And the first question is, how likely is it that this prayer to Aphrodite was danced?
Yes, I would say it was likely. Given that we know that choral performance was so common for lyric poetry in this period. Yes.
Oh, by the way, lyric poetry. Just define that for us.
Well, lyric poetry is poetry to the lyre. That's all it means. But in Greece, this is also called melic poetry. Melic's from melos, which means a limb, but also means a tune. It's the same word, and even the accent is the same.
Limb? You mean a lower limb or any of our four limbs?
Any of them, yeah, anything. It's a section. Yes, melos. Mele.
But that's like, I'm sorry to throw in something good, that's like the Welsh music terminology where they call it a variation, a cank, which is a limb or a branch.
Oh, wow.
A variation.
Yeah, a variation of a multi-variation piece. You know, if you've got a whole string of variations, they'll call one element of that a cank in Welsh, in medieval. Yeah. And that's Irish too, so we think that comes from Ireland. So a limb, I thought it meant melody. Do you mean our English word melody actually comes from the word for a limb?
It's conceivable it's two different words, actually. But there are two different words, but they're certainly spelt the same way. And they decline the same way. Yes. And so that's where that. Then the other question is where lyrics as like song lyrics comes from, but that's just a strange use of the same term, which came along for some reason.
So we have lyrics that may, of course, been accompanied by aulos, and therefore not properly. It could be auletic, but certainly at least a reasonable chance that it was danced. So that then leads us to a question surrounding the term foot, and I think could we just clarify? I initially jumped into this. With a presumption that I think might be wrong. That the word foot when you're talking about ancient Greek meter and ancient Greek rhythm, that the word foot had something to do with choreography, with dancing.
Yes.
Or does it just mean a measure?
Martin West, in his book on Indo-Europeans, he was, the great scholar of. He wondered about that, and you find a similar use of the word padam or pada or padam, which is the same root, to mean a metrical element in Indian poetry. So it means a verse, a line of poetry is called a pada, believe it or not, and he wondered about the relationship between these two, and he thought they probably were connected. And he suggested that the reason that feet become associated with like melody, with metrical patterns, the real metaphor at the back is like a chair or a table. A table stands on 4 feet, and similarly, a verse has 4 crucial elements. And this is how the Rig Veda works, or 3 in some cases. But we don't know about why words get associated with music and what the original sense is, and how it's very difficult to know for sure. But I'm perfectly happy to go along with the idea that for Greeks in, say, 500 BC and the 5th century BC, when they were using these terms, they were thinking of that.
So it might be like a tripod with 3 legs, or it might be a chair with 4 legs, and it might have been nothing to do with legs at all. It's just a unit of measurement. But the question that we have concerns a phenomenon where in Sappho's poetry, she follows a wonderfully regular pattern, and it's quite predictable, apart from the 4th syllable. And that 4th syllable has a name.
Bob.
So the Greeks called it anceps.
I think so, yes.
And what does that mean?
It means doubtful.
So it's all beautifully structured, but she kind of plays with the variability, the fluidity in that 4th syllable. Okay, well, we're going to try and render or understand the options that a performer faces. And the first option is basically whether you stick in 6/8 or whether you occasionally switch into 7/8. In order to accommodate this uncertain syllable that might have two beats or might have just one beat.
Where are you getting 6/8 from?
So I'm getting 6/8 because when I go dum dee dum da diddly dum dee do, I think that's in 6/8.
But where's the dum-dee coming from? Just explain that to me.
Dum is long and D is short.
Okay, so in a Sapphic stanza, you have lots of patterns of a long syllable followed by a short syllable.
That's it. Now, Ian, am I right in thinking that we call, or the ancient metricians called the long short, the dumdi, they called that a trochee?
That's true. Yes.
Great. Okay. One step. Next step, you switch it around the other way. A short long, didum, dum di dum di dum di didum. If you have a didum, it's an iamb.
I am too. I am.
And are these old terms?
Choky means running. And I don't know when they're first attested. Iambos is a very old genre, largely comprising poetry written in the iambic meter, which is like the spoken bits of Greek tragedy and comedy are in the 5th century BC are in iambic.
Well, I love iambs because it makes me think I'm from Scotland and Strathspey. You know, da-dum, ding, da-dum, da-dum, ba-dum, dun, da-dum. I always associate this iambic thing with your gatherings and your Strathspey Scottish rhythm. But of course that.
I reckon Sappho is into Scottish rhythm.
Just like it's like to like Shakespeare. I am to be or not to be. That is the question.
Oh, to be. So to be is short long.
But it's 6 of them makes up a line of a Shakespeare.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Thank you. Okay, got it. So we have come up with a way of singing the Sapphic stanza. So we have trochee, 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 iamb, breathe. And I'm going to just add because there's a single syllable at the end. And so we were thinking could be long or short. It's an indifferent syllable at the end of the line, and I'm just going to say breath.
It's another anceps, which irritatingly is 2 syllables.
Okay, well I'm going to say
it's a syllable with an identity crisis.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I'm going to play around. I'm going to try a Sapphic stanza in this kind of didactic way in order to explore the different performance options. Okay, so this is one possible performance option where we're imagining the foot or half a dipody. Okay, so if a dipody has 2 feet, half of that, and we're going to imagine it's 6/8, so it's going trochee, 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 iamb, breath. Trochee, 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 iamb, breath. And that's the sort of regular pattern. But we have this ancept syllable, the 4th syllable might be long. And if we're going to stay in 6/8, big if here, okay? If we stay in 6/8, we're wondering whether it would be trochee sponde, trochee, iamb, breath. Trochee sponde, trochee, iamb, breath. Like that.
If you have a regular beat and your syllable length is changing, then you can cram 2 long syllables into the same space of time as a long syllable and a short syllable, and that seems like an intuitive thing to do.
I mean, the reason we were trying this is because we were wondering if it was danced. And if you've got a group of people dancing, we assumed that it needs to be in time.
If you're keeping the beat the same, then when you change a syllable length, then 2 long syllables fits into the same amount of time as 1 long syllable and 1 short syllable. And it's the difference between trochee sponde, trochee, iamb, stop, whatever. Or trochee sponde, trochee, iamb, stop.
And the first is in 6/8, adding up to 6, and the second is in 7/8, which adds an extra little beat so it kind of goes asymmetric or goes Balkan from our perspective. And maybe people are kind of resistant to this for all sorts of reasons, or they love it and sort of warm towards the asymmetric interpretation.
If the relationship between long syllable, short syllable is always, long syllable is exactly double short syllable, and that's strict and it has to be preserved, that means I have to do, 20 times as much practice in order to learn Sappho's Aphrodite song. Because whenever there's a different syllable length, I'm learning a time signature change, which I've then got to memorize, and it's a massive amount of work and it's really confusing. Whereas if I keep the pulse the same and the foot is the same length, then it is quite fluid.
If the anset syllable changes the meter, if it changes the time signature from 6/8 to 7/8 in our modern minds, then that means that you couldn't rock up to an ancient Greek drama and say, "Oh, we're going to do a dokmiak," or "Oh, we're going to do a Sapphic stanza," and you would know the rhythm, because you'd have to know the words of every single verse in order to get the rhythm right.
Yeah, that's quite it's a fundamental issue, isn't it?
I'm aware that, it'd be lovely to talk and have a whole week on this with you, Ian, but there's one more question to throw in to the mix that we'd love to get you thinking about. And we've talked, so far we've only talked about the ambivalence or the indifference of the fourth syllable. But we also have an indifference on the 11th syllable. And in the case of the third line, sometimes there's enjambement and it carries through and becomes, it links.
What's enjambement?
That's what it is. It's where two lines are metrically linked, I guess, isn't it? Or where there's a close connection between the end of one line and the beginning of another.
It is usually, I think, a word. So in other words, you have a word break across the line. So it kind of joins the line by putting a word across it. You're kind of there smoothing the line into one by having a word that joins the line together.
Well, that's not enjambment, because that is one line, as you say. You wouldn't use enjambment for that, because it is lines 3 and 4 are really the same line. They're just written out as separate lines. At least they are in Sappho.
Why are they written out as separate lines?
Hellenistic commentator, scholar decided to do that.
And people copied him. Somebody decided to do it and everybody followed suit. Maybe it's convenient because it fits on the paper better.
I have friends who work on things like this. We could find out exactly what it is. But yeah, I think that's someone just made the decision. But again, that's an interesting. Well, you can see why they would do it. It's because you get 3 equivalent lines and then one that's not.
Well, could we just give you, because we've prepared 2 little experiments and we're a bit nervous about this, or at least I am. One goes, well, maybe I won't explain. Maybe we'll just do it, and you can hear these 2, and we'll ask you what you think.
Yeah, go on.
So Steph's going to give the dippities. So down is the down, and up. Off we go. Trokey, 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 iamb, iamb, breath. Trokey, 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 iamb, iamb, breath. Trokey, 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 iamb, iamb, on, trokey, iamb, breathe. So that was...
That's the first one. That we did that exactly that in Matera, right?
Option A.
Option A, straightforward, okay? No particular... everything's kind of regular. Now, we're going to try joining together lines 3 and 4, particularly because it might be a short syllable. And so this is a possible solution.
Right.
Trokey, 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 iamb, breath. Trokey, 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 iamb, breath. Trokey, 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 iamb, on, trokey, iamb, on.
The second one was without any break between those 2 lines, between 3 and 4.
Yeah. I just carried it through.
Do it again.
I'm going to do that again, and this time I'm going to be mischievous, and I'm going to throw in a few spondees. Okay. I'm going to randomly try and throw Steph off her predictable ups and downs by throwing in a spondee. Off we go. Trokey, 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 iamb, breath. Trokey, 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 iamb, Trochee sponde, trochee iamb, on, trochee iamb, end. Trochee sponde, trochee iamb, breath. Trochee sponde, trochee iamb, breath. Trochee, iamb, on, trochee iamb, end.
Yes, that's but the sponde sounds fine. I mean, I wouldn't even have. I can see the spondes in there are they're an intellectual difficulty, but I can deal with it, myself. It doesn't seem to bother me that much. This is the fundamental difference between epic poetry with the hexameter and the rest of in Greek lyric poetry, and actually, in fact, iambic too, is that you can substitute long for there are ancept syllables, right? So they must have been able to deal with it, and I would have thought if any particular form of poetry doesn't get danced, it's epic, which is the one where you don't have ancept syllables, right?
We'd expect that, you'd think it would be easy to have, if ancept syllables change the time signature, then you would expect them to be an epic where you didn't dance. But we only get ancept syllables.
It's like there is some sort of break. Some sort of break is felt at those points, I think.
As a musician or composer even, I would put it the other way. I'd say it would be awfully dull if it were predictable. And so you want to have some kind of bit of
some sort of variety.
Pizzazz.
Yes, variety would be the point, because it gets boring if it's the same.
But at the same time as variety, you need to be able to get, 20 people to dance it. And so are they all learning the words so that the variety, how much variety?
As long as you're thinking in terms of the beat being on the foot as a whole, that's the boundary you're kind of thinking of, then you just kind of fit them in, It's like walking. You can. I don't know if you. I like doing silly walks, and I just get bored. And you can, if you're walking to a rhythm, you can do a long short in the same space as a normal 2-step. You can just do that. It kind of works. Da 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 da. Right? I mean, you can do this. This is just how we are.
Yeah.
I don't find it problematic. I don't really understand all the stuff about 7 time and so on. It almost seems like unnecessary. You could analyze it in a different way.
That's so important. Ethnomusicologists also, the Bulgarians or the Greeks didn't write it down in 7/8 or 6/8.
Yeah.
And this kind of it's a bit too forensic, and also it kind of obscures the fluidity, a kind of bit of pulse elasticity. That maybe is important and was important in the style and the sense of what gives it quality and idiom.
But as I understand it, a lot of the controversy arises from a really important principle for understanding Greek meter is that the ratio of a long syllable to a short syllable is 2-1, and that is an absolute, given, but the point to a musician, to many musicians, is that there is no, in music, pulse is elastic.
Yeah.
So a ratio of 2-1 could be anything, depending on the pulse. So there is no fixed way of interpreting that, and 2-1 could be that could change depending on the pulse, and it could change depending on how you interpret your beat. So it's not so fixed.
I think 2-1 comes from Homer, comes from epic meter, where that's just how it works, and some anapaestic meter too, and maybe some others. But there's all of lyric meter where it's not really working like that, as we've just seen. I mean, the Sapphic Stanza is the prime example of a non-epic meter. It's a simple lyric stanza, but I think Pindar probably works in the same way, actually.
And we know that things weren't just 2-1, because there is, I think, ancient discussion about overlongs. The long syllable could get a bit longer. And in any case, what we were doing there with fitting things into 6/8, all the long syllables are still longer than all the short syllables.
Very interesting. Yeah. Thank you. But I can't answer your questions. You're going to have to, all I can tell you is it doesn't seem like, in terms of performance, it would be such an amazing problem, really. Anyway, it's great fun.
Ian, thank you so much for hunting imaginary songs with us. It's been an absolute joy to chat to you about Sappho.
Absolute pleasure, anytime. Thank you very much.